Welcome back. In this episode, we are going to address the question, how do I get my money out of my IRA or 401k with the least amount of tax? Do you know that when I have taught this concept to CPAs and tax attorneys, they sit there with their mouths open because they didn't know what they didn't know? So at the end of this episode, you're going to be blown away, just like they are, with ways that you can actually access money with the least amount of tax impact out of that tax trap, an IRA or 401k. I'm Doug Andrew, and I've been a tax specialist for more than 45 years. And I was recently at a conference. I belong to a mastermind group called the Genius Network. And during lunch, we don't know who we're sitting next to, but the gentleman next to me was a very successful educator of advanced continuing education to CPAs and tax attorneys. When I shared with him what I'm going to share with you, he was like blown away. He said, I didn't know what I didn't know. Because so many people will roll over money from a 401k into an IRA, continuing to defer tax. I often say that's going from the frying pan into the fire, so to speak. You're continuing to just defer and postpone and procrastinate paying the tax. So I coined the term years ago, a strategic rollout. Not a rollover, you want to roll the money out. So let's go over here, and I'm going to share with you, there's actually three different phases that you can employ with a strategic rollout. Number one, I would help many people that had a ton of money yet to be taxed, trapped in IRAs or 401ks, strategically reposition your retirement funds, subjecting them to tax sooner than later. Get the taxes over and done with in today's lower brackets. So you want to take care of that rather than postpone and increasing the inevitable liability. Why do you want to keep deferring to some perceived unknown advantage and then withdraw your money when we're convinced taxes are going to be higher in the future? Now, this can be painful. When I would suggest this to people, at first I felt like Sam I Am in Green Eggs and Ham. You will like this, you will see. Oh no, I don't want to do. But after 5 years of paying the tax, they enjoyed tax-free income thereafter, and they were going, thank you, Sam I Am. I like these green eggs and ham. So the second part of this strategy is once you've paid the tax strategically, maybe over a 5-year period. Generally, you can get the taxes over and done with in 5 years without putting yourself in the highest tax bracket unless you happen to have that much money. But we've actually helped many people go from the highest bracket to a 0% bracket in 5 years. So second is to reposition the after-tax monies. You pay the tax, you get it out, doesn't mean you have to spend it, into investment vehicles that will allow tax-free accumulation, distribution, and transfer. Now, in my book, The Laser Fund, I explain there's only one vehicle in the Internal Revenue Code that allows you to accumulate your money tax-free, then be able to access your money, including all the gain, all the interest, dividends, whatever, totally tax-free if you live to be 120 or longer. And when you die, it blossoms in value. It doubles, triples many times and transfers income tax-free. And I call it the Laser Fund. Therefore, when you finally do pass away, it blossoms in value. It reimburses you, your spouse, your beneficiaries with far more than the tax you paid during the rollout. So at the end of the day, you're not out anything. You get all that money back that you paid in tax by getting it out. So the key is to reposition it into something that's going to be tax-free from now on. Many CPAs go, why would you take it out if you're not going to need the money? I said, because you want to convert it to something tax-free that will blossom and transfer tax-free. And this guy at lunch, he goes, oh, what does that? And so I educate them, and I send him a free copy of my book, The Laser Fund. So make sure you get a copy of my book, The Laser Fund. I'm a tax strategist. And so I would help people offset some or all of the tax liability incurred during the rollout, 5-year period or 7-year period, by resurrecting deductions that maybe they were killing and they didn't know they were hurting themselves at the end of the day. They were going down the highway with one foot on the gas pedal and the other foot on the brake pedal, so to speak. They were deferring, and killing their deductions, paying off their house. And when you retire, the kids are gone, or if they're not gone, you can't deduct them anymore, see? You think that in retirement, you're going to be in a lower bracket. You're not, even if you have less income, because you're not contributing money to IRAs or 401ks. You don't have that deduction. If you're a business owner, you don't have those deductions. If you pay off your house, you don't have those deductions. And so in retirement, we got rid of all those deductions, and Congress keeps raising taxes, so people aren't in a lower bracket. So I help people resurrect some of those deductions that they legitimately can. And I'm going to show you an example and a story where we saved a guy over $250,000 of unnecessary tax by doing this. Sometimes we continue to earn tax-free interest for life on what you paid in tax. How'd you like to do that? So stay with me here, because I'm going to show you an actual client we did this with, and it's one of thousands that we have saved unnecessary tax by doing a strategic rollout. So for many, many years, I had developed a special software program. I think it's still the only software on the planet that shows people the darkness of the night, so to speak. If they keep deferring their money in an IRA or 401k, at age 70 and a half, taking RMDs, required minimum distributions, thinking you're saving tax. And this software would show people, if they strung it out and did that, how much they would actually pay in tax by stringing it out. And most people were flabbergasted. And then I would show them, if you do a strategic rollout, watch what happens. And they went, wow, I end up with this much more, sometimes tripling or quadrupling people's net spendable income. Now, if you don't believe me, come over here and I'm going to show you the numbers with an actual gentleman that we did this with, and we quadrupled his cash flow and income over what he would have had out of his IRAs and 401ks. So this gentleman came in 2010, right after the worst decade since the Great Depression. That decade, we call it the lost decade, because most Americans lost up to 40% twice in that decade on their money in the market in IRAs and 401ks. 2001 to 2003, after 9/11, the terrorist attacks, they saw $1 million nest egg dwindle in value down to $600,000. It took 4 years till 2007 to get back to break even. And then in 2008, they lost 40% again in one single year. And it took until 2012 to come back to break even. Our clients doubled their money during that time period. Some tripled their money. So this guy came to us in 2010, and he had $600,000 trapped in his IRAs or 401ks. Now, he didn't need this money. This is common. A lot of times people save and they're frugal and they don't need the money. But if he doesn't start withdrawing money out of that based upon the government's life expectancy formula with at least an RMD, required minimum distribution, he's going to pay 50% in penalties. That $600,000 the previous decade had dropped to under $360,000 in value twice. He was barely back to break even. His advisor said, hang in there. The market always comes back, see? Well, basically, he had lost a decade of growth. The advisor said, let's just do 4% payout. This is the 4% rule in the financial services industry. Because Dalbar, who studies investor behavior, says the average person in IRAs or 401ks in the market only averages about 3.49% because they're buying and selling at the wrong times. And so if you pull out 4%, you're going to slowly deplete your nest egg, but not before you die. That's called the 4% rule. If you take out more than 4%, you know, most broker dealers, they'll make you sign a waiver to not sue them for outliving your money. So the advisor was complying and said, just take out 4%. You don't need the money. And then you won't have to pay a penalty. 4% of $600,000 is $24,000. In a 33% bracket, he was actually a little higher. He has to pay a third of that, $8,000 in tax. He's only netting $16,000. I don't know if you're like me, but I don't accumulate $600,000. I have a measly $16,000 a year to buy gas and groceries and prescriptions and golf green fees. That's pretty pathetic. The key is, if he died, his wife had already passed away. His children would only net $400,000 because they're not saving tax. They're going to have to pay tax on this when they inherit it, or whenever they take it out. He came to us, and this is what we did, a strategic rollout. Don't get hung up on how we do this. You can read my books. We basically took out $12,500 a month. You times that by 12 months, that's $150,000 a year. He didn't need the money. I'm paying tax. Okay, just hang with me here. If he pulls out $150,000 and he pays a third, $50,000 in tax, he has a net of what? $100,000 to put into my recommended vehicle, the laser fund. Let's just use that. $100,000 a year after tax over 5 years, that's $500,000 in the laser fund. He's been averaging 10.07 like I have. What's 10% on 500,000? 50 grand, tax-free. How much better is 50,000 than 16,000? It was triple. I said, I can quadruple. What would you rather have, triple or quadruple the income? He goes, I'll take 4 times. So what we did is we took this out and we resurrected deductions. He had a bunch of rental properties that he had been paying down, and we went out and refinanced them, and we took that equity out and we were able to leverage safely, and we resurrected tax deductions that he'd been killing. And so every $150,000 that he pulled out was offset with $150,000 of new tax deductions that we resurrected. This is appearing on the front of his tax return as a distribution, but on Schedule E, on his real estate return, he has $150,000 of new tax deductions with the refinanced mortgages. He was getting the $150,000 out tax-free because it was washed away with the new deduction. He pulls it out, he washes it away with the deduction. Do you know we ended up with $750,000 at the end of 5 years? Because he was earning 8.25% average during the 5-year rollout. $750,000, if he only earns 8%, he can have $60,000 a year tax-free forever without depleting his principal. He's actually been earning 10, like me. 10% on $750,000 is $75,000. I have a question. How much more is $75,000 than $16,000? How many of you watching this would rather have $75,000 than $16,000? Well, what if he dies? If he dies here, the laser fund blossoms to $1.2 million, which is triple what his IRAs or 401ks would be worth. I always ask people, why would you generate this much income in retirement when you could generate this? And why, at the end of the day, when you pass away, would you leave behind this when you could leave behind this if it doesn't cost you anything? We do this all the time with strategic rollouts. If this just overwhelmed you, you may want to watch this episode again and again, plus several other episodes. In fact, at the end, I want you to click on this one so you can sort of connect the dots. And then you can also get a copy of my most recent best-selling book, The Laser Fund. It has this story plus 61 other stories just like this. You'll learn how we've helped some people save $500,000, $1 million, $1.2 million for one couple. We've taken people from the highest tax bracket in 5 years down to a 0% tax bracket. So this is just one of the strategies that I've helped many, many people do. A strategic rollout, you get the money out of those IRAs or 401ks, maybe in a 5-year period. Get the taxes over and done with sooner than later. Reposition the net after-tax money into something that's going to be tax-free from now on. The best place, in my opinion, is the laser fund. And number 3, if you can strategize and offset some or all of the tax with new deductions, I've helped many people avoid even all of the tax during the rollout process. And it has not only tripled but quadrupled their net spendable retirement income. I want that for your future.